Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to the Commission's public forum on our draft decision for Wannon Water. My name is Satish Bojani, and I'm one of the Commissioners of the Essential Services Commission. I want to let you know that the forum is being recorded to ensure access for those who are unable to attend today. So any statement, comment, or question you may make will be included in the recording, which we plan to make available on our website. To start, I acknowledge the traditional owners of all the lands wherever you are for today's forum. For me, I am speaking from the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I wish to acknowledge them as traditional owners. I would also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land and waters of the service area of Wannon Water. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and I extend that respect to all Aboriginal people here today. Thank you for taking the time to come together this afternoon for this forum. I'd like to introduce some members of the staff of the Commission. We have with us the Executive Director of Price Monitoring and Regulation, Marcus Crudden, the Senior Regulatory Manager, Dean Wickington, and various members of the water team at the Commission. We also have joining us here today attendees from the water business itself, Wannon Water, of course. I start by acknowledging and welcoming Andrew Jeffers, the Managing Director.
Hello, everyone.
Andrew. And there may be others as well, but I will at least like to acknowledge Mary Alexander, Stephen Waterhouse, and Kelly King from Wannon Water as well. And apologies, Andrew, if you've got other members of your team here, but certainly anyone from Wannon Water, most welcome, and thank you for joining us. In addition, I extend my thanks to all the people on the call for making the time to join us today. I do finally want to let you all know that we also have a member of the media present here today. Now, before we get to the agenda, some quick housekeeping. If you have any questions or comments while someone is talking, please type them into the chat so that we can build these into the conversation. If possible, please keep your microphone muted when not speaking to avoid feedback and background noise. In addition to your participation today, you can also provide written feedback via the Engage Victoria website. And please do let us know if there's another preferred option for how we engage with you, as we're always open to receiving feedback. The web address for Engage Victoria will be on the slides we're about to start sharing with you, so you'll see those come onto the screen soon. I'll use the first part of today's forum to give you a brief introduction to our role in price regulation. But as always, the main purpose of this event is to hear from you and answer any questions you might have on our draft decision. To help shape today's discussions, we'll cover how we assess the price submission and our draft decision. We'll invite Wannon Water to respond to our draft decision, and then we'll open up the floor to give everybody an opportunity to hear from you through questions and comments. We appreciate being able to have an open and honest conversation with you today. The insights from these engagements genuinely help us shape our decisions. Okay, so let's start with the Commission. We regulate Victoria's energy, water and transport sectors and oversee the Fair Go rate system. We also administer the Victorian Energy Upgrades Program. We've been regulating water prices more than 20 years, including for Wannon Water. For the water sector, we approve prices and service standards, monitor and report on performance, and administer customer service codes. We are currently reviewing new water prices to apply from the 1st of July this year, 2023, for 14 water businesses. The prices we approve will reflect an assessment of the efficient costs water businesses need to recover to provide the valued services to their customers. Following consultation, we will issue a determination that sets the maximum prices that Wannon Water may charge customers. I'd like to now invite Dean to step us through how we assess the price submission and our draft decision. Welcome, Dean.
Afternoon, Satish. Afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming along. I'll just step through a high-level overview of our review process and our draft decision, just to give participants an idea of where we're headed. And obviously, this is part of our consultation process before we move to a final decision in June, and that's where prices will be set for the next 5 years. Just in terms of our process, we, like for Wannon Water and all businesses, we assess its price submission to ensure it complies with the requirements of something called the Water Industry Regulatory Order. So as an economic regulator, we're charged with approving maximum prices, but we do that under certain rules, so we don't have unfettered power around this. So we need to comply with certain things as well, and they're specified in some detail in the Water Industry Regulatory Order, and also assess that the proposal from Wannon Water meets the requirements of our guidance. So expectations on the overall approach, so things like engagement and quality of inputs, things like that. And also the guidance embeds something called the Primo framework, which was introduced in 2018. And it was really meant to, and I think it's achieved this, make sure businesses are at its heart are speaking with their customers about what they value most, and also giving us proposals that represent the business's best offer in terms of outcomes, which can be services and also prices. And as part of our process, we also need to have regard to the Water Industry Act and the Essential Services Commission Act, which is the banner legislation that applies to us. And under that, we need to, our objective is to promote the long-term interests of Victorian consumers. Next slide, thanks, Natul. Great. So the process that is embedded in the Water Industry Regulatory Order is the business sort of leads the dance, if you like. They make a price submission that we assess. So the business starts that process. It's called a proposed respond model, where the business proposes something and we respond to that. And it's up to Wannon Water to make sure it complies with the Water Industry Regulatory Order and also our guidance. And our draft decision, the purpose of that really is to test our views with Wannon Water and other stakeholders before we move to a final decision and a price determination, which then becomes binding. So it's a key step in our engagement process. So the red line there in terms of that process shows you where we're at. We've got issued our draft decision in April. Submissions are closing on the 9th of May. And we need to make a final decision in June to have new prices in place for the 1st of July 2023, which under Wannon Water's proposal will apply for 5 years. In terms of our process, so we go through a few things. This is at a fairly high level. We've got a diverse and skilled team, and we often use consultants to augment our review process, particularly around expenditure. And we did do that this time with FTI Consulting. So what we do is we look at Wannon Water's engagement approach, and how it considered the feedback in developing its proposals. Wannon Water has done a good job of that, and we'll come to that a bit later on. We test the expenditure and demand forecast underneath those proposals. So while engagement's trying to find out what customers what customers value most, we need to test that the underpinning assumptions used to deliver prices are sound. We verify the supporting assumptions and data. So is that things like making sure that the latest information is being used and reliable information is being used and so on. and evaluating how Wannon Water has managed its risk and also its performance. Risk can be shared or accepted by a business or taken on by customers, and how a business does that is part of our review, and also how a business has performed over the past 5 years. I mentioned testing expenditure forecasts earlier, but some of the things we do within that around capital in particular, and it's been a bit of an issue in this review, is the phasing and timing of that. Most businesses have proposed a ramp up in their capital program. In dollars, part of it's input cost related. Some of it is actually volume of work related for things like sustainability of services and things like that. So we do check that the planning is going into it to make sure that programs are deliverable in line with what a business is putting forward. Next slide, thanks. So in terms of our draft decision, we propose to accept many elements of Wannon Water's proposals. So things around tariff structure and form of price control. Tariffs, I think the business has been thinking about the structure of water tariffs for a while, and fixed and variable balance, and it has proposed to lift the variable component of water charges in the next period, which our draft decision proposes to approve. A price cap form of price control, so what that does for customers basically locks in prices over a period, so there's good certainty for them. The guaranteed service level scheme, so this is rebates and amounts that are payable by Wannon Water if they don't deliver on certain service standards. Generally, I think they're the same as what exists now, but they were tested by Wannon Water through its engagement process, and we've ticked those off, as well as some of the service standards related to reliability and faults. Our draft decision in terms of headline numbers proposes to approve a revenue requirement of about 370 million. I think it was 388 was the revenue requirement that Wannon Water could have claimed through this process. So we're a bit lower, but it has proposed to charge lower prices than it could have. And I think, Andrew, you might mention that later on as well in your slides, so you can cover that one off. In terms of things that we're seeking from Wannon Water in response to our draft decisions, so a high inflation environment at the moment. The CPI number that came out yesterday was a 7% in annual terms. I'll come to that in a second in terms of what that means in terms of bills. Some more information around operating costs. So we're interested in the reasons for a ramp up in operating costs in 21-22, and I don't know into technical things, but that year is critical for setting the baseline for future costs. So we want to make sure that that number is robust. There was quite a tick up in that year in a relative sense. Some other things around the proposal. So in terms of capital expenditure, I know Wannon Water's got a big focus in meeting customer needs around water quality and the Great Tasting Water Project, and our draft decision didn't accept the full amounts that Wannon Water proposed for that, just because there wasn't a solution identified or a proposed service solution. So as an economic regulator, we kind of need that information to assess the costings that go into customer prices. So that wasn't there for us to approve and assess the prudence and efficiency of that expenditure. But we do recognise the importance of that project to the business and customers. So what we did do is propose like seed funding, if you like, so that can keep moving that project. So customer expectations can be delivered on. And I think we've left the door open there for the Wannon team to come back on that. And if there's another way we can go about that, then the business can put something forward on that as well. But I just wanted to emphasise that we do see that as important. An important project that we understand sought by customers. Other things on capital, just around the Warrnambool sewage treatment plant, probably the biggest project for the business. It was slated to occur in this period. It's been deferred to the next. So we've proposed that customer prices don't reflect the costs of that plant until it's in service. That's just trying to align customer payments with when they receive the benefits from the service itself. Other things, I think just generally, we'll need to think about its prices in response to our draft decision. But as I mentioned earlier, it's proposed to recover less through prices than what it could claim if you looked at their calculated revenue requirement, at least in our draft decision. Next slide, thanks. Estimated annual water and sewage bills under the business proposal. So currently just over $1,100. So going up modestly each year. I think there's a fairly flat price profile there. So in real terms, typical owner occupier residential customer would pay $1,115 in the year that's coming, up from just over $1,100, and by 27-28 it reaches just over $1,150. Other estimated bills for other high level categories of customer are on that slide. I think it's important to note, and this is part of the reason we've challenged businesses around the inflation environment. So the 7% inflation number for March, the annual figure to March, is 7%. That gets added to bills from 1st of July this year. So that would mean the step up in bills is probably to around $1,190 under the proposal, under the price submission proposal put forward by Wannon Water. So inflation does add a bit to the billing impacts on customers, and hence we've sort of spotlighted that issue for businesses to think about a bit more in terms of how they might manage that on behalf of their customers. Thanks for that. Here are some of this just summarises this slide, the changes that we've proposed in our draft decision compared to what Wannon Water proposed for operating and also capital expenditure. So down a bit for operating expenditure. I think that was to do with some one-off projects for the 21-22 OPEX year, which sort of formed the baseline for us going forward in terms of our investment, and also the capital expenditure side of things was around the Great Tasting Water project in the main. Next slide, thanks. This just summarises a bit of what I've touched on already. This is capital expenditure over the past few years, so the current regulatory period from 2018-19. The light blue line there is the actual spend by the business, so you can see that's a bit below the darker blue line there, which was what was embedded into pricing. So it was lower through this period, largely reflecting the delays with the Warrnambool sewage treatment plant. And then it picks up under Wannon Water's proposals next time, I think largely to reflect that project being paid for in the next period. Thanks, Natul. This is forecast operating costs. So I've mentioned the 21-22 year, a bit of a pickup there in the OPEX, and why we focus on that year is because it sets the starting point for forecast operating expenditure, which goes into the revenue requirement and customer prices. Thanks, Natul. So I mentioned something called Primo earlier on. So it's a process by which the businesses themselves self-rate their price submission, and we also rate the price submission. And on that scale, there's 4 points, if you like. So starting at the highest rating, it's leading. The next one down is advanced, then standard, and then basic. The standard price submission basically represents the status quo in terms of value for customers at a high level. Wannon Water proposed a standard rating for Primo in its price submission, and overall we've agreed with that rating. Just some of the things around that and why. Its engagement program was strong, gave customers an opportunity to participate, which was probably a different experience for many businesses given the impacts of the pandemic and changing forms of communication. Its engagement was also inclusive and diverse. We put in new expectations in our guidance for inclusive and diverse engagement, including with vulnerable customers and also Indigenous Australians. In terms of generally at a high level, the business met its expectations in terms of delivering on its service commitments over the past 5 years. Its future-looking outcome measures and targets were developed in consultation with customers and are supported by them. So it probably was one of the few businesses that suggested an overall improvement in value through the service standard, which was good to see. And also proposed, as mentioned earlier, to charge below its revenue requirements. So that means it's not seeking to recover all the revenue it could through its customer prices. That said, probably wouldn't be doing our job if you didn't point to some things that were challenging. And I mentioned some earlier around the cost side of things and its approach to the Wannon sewage treatment plant cost recovery, which we was delivered to be delivered in this current period. Customers have started to pay for that project, and we've sort of addressed that in our draft decision and challenged the business to put forward a proposal that phases the recovery of those costs with when the service will start to be delivered. Thank you, Nitul. I think that's the end of my slides here. Satish, did you want to hand back to you or over to Andrew?
Sorry, thank you very much. Thanks, Dean. Yes, indeed. We'll now turn to Andrew Jeffers to invite you to present Wannon Water's response to our draft decision. Over to you, Andrew.
Yeah, thanks, Satish, and thanks, Dean, for that overview. So Satish did introduce me, but just to do that again, my name's Andrew Jeffers. I'm the Managing Director of Wannon Water. With me today, I do have Stephen Waterhouse, who's the General Manager of People and Business Services, Kelly King, who's the General Manager of Community and Corporate Services. I mentioned those two because they had quite a significant role in the development of our price submission. And we've also got a couple other people from our, Gareth and Mary from our corporate communications group. So thank you very much for this opportunity to talk. I should also, in thanking the ESC for this opportunity to present on our price submission response to the draft decision, also just acknowledge the community members in the room and welcome their contribution to today. I will go through a bit of a high-level overview of our draft decision, of our price submission, sorry, and also respond to the draft decision. So before if I go back one slide to the acknowledgement, please. I'm not sure who's driving that, but so I just want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land which Wannon Water operates, who are listed there. Today, I'm on the land of the Wadawurrung people in Geelong. And I pay respects to the elders past, present and emerging, and any Aboriginal person that may be here today. Thanks. Next slide, please. So in relation to our Wannon Water, we operate over a really large service region shown there on the slide. We have lots of different water supply systems and 34 towns we provide services to and 44,000 customers. So that creates some challenges for us, being a regional-based water corporation. There's generally low growth in that region, and we also have limited economies of scale to operate with, and that creates some challenges around being able to protect our bills from increasing costs. So one of our challenges in that operating environment is to keep bills low. That's certainly what we hear from our customers. The two documents on the right hand of the slide are the key documents. One is obviously the price submission which we put forward, which is our very genuine approach to putting bonding to the Commission's guidance in relation to the price submission. And in our view, we endeavoured to make completely customer-centric price submission. And the engagement report which sits behind that outlined the significant engagement we undertook in developing that price submission. Our price submission includes insights from customers which informed the key outcomes and projects and initiatives that had support from our customers. There really is a balancing act for us in delivering customer value and key projects and keeping prices affordable. And in this particular price submission, I'm not sure who's got the button, but yeah, eager that I am. So I'll give you a nod when I'm ready to go to the next slide. And a genuine intent by ourselves to try to bear risk and protect our customers from the risks associated with prices and things moving around. And our price submission at the end proposed increasing customer bills before CPI of less than 1% for owners and 2% for renters, and some additional supports for vulnerable customers. Next slide, please. So I mentioned the engagement. We had 7,700 instances of unique customer engagement over a 4-year period. It was comprehensive, adaptable, inclusive, and ongoing. It wasn't just a program for the price submission. It was over that 4 years where things refined. And it got distilled down to those key customer insights on the left-hand side of the table in front of you. Not planning to go through each and one of those, but they're there for people to read. Certainly keeping bills affordable was something that clearly came through quite consistently. We did have a deliberative panel of community representatives who considered those insights and a lot of other information in relation to our business. And with them, they developed outcomes and made a number of recommendations which are shown there on the right-hand side of the slide. And our board accepted those recommendations, and that formed the basis of our price submission proposal. So very customer-centric. The interesting one there, which I think is worth mentioning, is the customers did want bills kept affordable. When our deliberative community panel considered all those issues, they also agreed bills should be kept affordable, but there was a preference for gradual increases over time rather than substantial jumps in pricing later on. So that consistency. Next slide, please. So I did mention the balancing act and the challenge. Wannon Water is a not-for-profit business, so the revenues we raise through the prices are used to provide the services. So there is a balancing act. And this price submission process is a really useful way to examine both aspects to make sure that that balance is correct and driven by customers, because ultimately they're the ones that are impacted by both sides of those scales. So based on the customer feedback, we proposed a mix of customer outcomes that largely maintain the existing services that we provide, or the standards of services, but improve the customer experience of our services. And so that's been a key initiative through. Our initiatives that we proposed were very much aligned to each of those outcomes. From a capital perspective, we've got a $157 million capital program proposed. Dean mentioned the Wannon sewerage treatment plant, so completing that project, which has started and contracts awarded and is working in earnest. That is, completing that program is part of the $157 million. The new renewables program, and so what the renewables program is ensuring we continually invest in replacing old assets, pipelines and pump stations to ensure that our services remain reliable. And we've consistently, over history, made sure that level in renewals occurs, because that's what customers will experience, increased outages if that declines. And we've continued to do that in this price submission based on good quality information and analysis. And as Dean mentioned, we did respond to our customers in relation to dissatisfaction about the taste of water in mainly some groundwater towns, and put forward an investment program around great tasting water to do that. So they're the key things responding to customers in our capital program. From an operating cost perspective, the main things in our price submission were, as I said before, improving the experience that customers have of our services and interactions, investment in a new and contemporary customer relation management system and billing system, and that should lay the foundations for improved customer experience. New costs associated with operating the new infrastructure, so the Wannon Sewage Treatment Plant and Great Tasting Water Project, but also new expenditure associated with providing more support for those customers experiencing difficulty in payment of bills, and that they are the more vulnerable people in our community. And that, again, was quite well supported by our customers in their feedback. We have identified cost savings initiatives and built those into the price submission. Even the Commission's own analysis has Wannon Water as the third most aggressive in terms of operating cost reduction of the ones that they've assessed in this cycle. So we've really put ourselves under that pressure to see if we can make money go further. And ultimately, that balancing act, those scales, we propose something that improves service while ensuring our bill and impacts are minimalised. I want to go to the next slide, please. I just want to explain this chart. So this is a chart of customer bills, and on the left-hand side, where it goes from $0 to $1,800, is our owner-occupier bill. On the right-hand side, and that's associated with the blue line on the chart. On the right-hand side is our renter average annual bill. And you can see that goes from 0 to 450. And the X scale on the bottom is the 3 regulatory periods, the 2 previous ones, and this forward proposed one. So if you see that the chart of Wannon Water prices over the 3 regulatory periods, including this proposed regulatory period, prices have reduced for owner occupiers, and this is before CPI, from 1,667 to 1,106, and this price submission proposes an increase up to 1,154 before CPI. And similarly with renters, it's reduced from $365 per annum down to $207 at the end of this current regulatory period, and in the proposed one that will increase to $229. So that's an interesting view of prices over time. It's an indication that Wannon Water has been quite focused on delivering affordability to customers in our communities over the longer period of time. Go to the next slide, please. So just moving on to responding to the draft decision. As Satish and Dean mentioned, that our response is due by the 9th of May, so we're still working through our response. So I'm just providing some high-level feedback here. And Dean also mentioned at the outset that Wannon Water's revenue request is lower than the revenue requirement, and that's shown in the chart here. So I will explain the chart on the right-hand side of the page now. So the model, which is completed, which includes the costs that Dean went through before, the operational capital costs and other bits and pieces that build up to the revenue requirement, added up to $384 million. Our revenue request was $360 million, and that's in the orange line. They are different to the numbers in the chart there. Those numbers have had an NPV applied, so it does tend to reduce them a bit, but the scale is the same. So we requested less than what the revenue requirement came out in the model. And the ESC's draft decision, as Dean went through, did reduce some capital.
Oh dear. Is that just me, or has Andrew unfortunately frozen temporarily, I hope? Not sure if you can hear us, Andrew, but unfortunately the screen is frozen. Not sure if you're actually still connected or it's dropped out. But let's give him a moment to see if he's able to rejoin us, or if he's dropped out or the line improves. One of the modern pitfalls of online communications, I guess. Whilst we're waiting for Andrew, wasn't sure, Steve or Kelly, if you wanted to make any other observations at this particular point in time.
Excuse me, maybe I'll jump in, Satish. There's only another slide after this one, so maybe I'll pick up from where Andrew left off, and then hopefully he might rejoin.
Yeah, of course. Obviously, very happy to throw back to him in due course if he's able to rejoin us. So no problem. But yeah, anything you'd like to add, more than welcome, Steve.
Right, so Andrew was just pointing out on that graph that's on the screen there, the draft decision by the ESC, whilst it did reduce the revenue requirement, it's still below the revenue that we requested in our price submission. So our response is, or will be, in the context of that for a start. And if we jump to the last slide, there were some specific requests within the draft decision. Dean mentioned a couple of them before, and we will respond to those requests. So we're currently considering all those in a full bucket. So CPI, the impact of inflation. So we acknowledge that inflation is rather high. It may not reflect our cost base. There are some overs and unders that occur in that space, and we do have a pretty strong program looking after customers who do find it a little bit difficult to pay their bills. So we'll consider that and respond in our draft decision. We will address the increase in cost in the 21-22 year. In particular, I think we can demonstrate that those increase in the cost in that 1 year, they are reasonable and they are ongoing. The FTI consultant who did some work on our expenditure, their final report did make statements around those, the baseline costs. They believed that they were reasonable and ongoing. We'll address the decision to include seed funding for the Great Tasting Water project. We remain committed to that project for our community. It's been a taste of water in those communities has been an issue for us for an extended period of time. Provide some information about our new customer contribution model. We'll address the Primo rating, in particular, probably the Commission's view of the management aspect, and that's tied up with the baseline operating costs. We have some real specifics around cost of debt adjustments, which probably only the Commission crew on the line here will understand. Some outcomes reporting and some updated Victorian government growth projections and how that might impact our demand. Not that we're expecting any of those to have any impact. And lastly, we'll just consider the implications of the draft decision on our proposed outcomes and service levels. We are talking with the Commission staff about a couple of those things. So whilst Dean said at the outset it was a propose respond type model, I think we've been pretty collaborative in our approach to this price submission before we submitted the submission. So we intend to continue on that path during this period. I think we're on track to respond by the 9th of May as requested. That's us. Thanks, Satish.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Stephen. And thank you, Kelly, for the update that Andrew is trying to rejoin us if he possibly can. What I thought we might do is to take this opportunity to move to questions and answers. And if Andrew is able to join us, I will obviously and make sure that he gets an opportunity to say anything else that he'd like to add when he is able, if he's able to join us as well. So let's hear some of the views from the outside on anything that's been raised today or any other topics or concerns that people may have. It would genuinely be valuable for us to hear from all who are here today. We do find that very useful to hear about what you think about what's being proposed. Can I just, in doing so, provide a reminder that this public forum is being recorded, and this means that any statement or comment you make or question you ask will be included in the recording. Any question you ask using the chat function will be read out along with your name, and we'll include that in the recording as well. For any verbal comments, please use the raise your hand function and you'll be invited to unmute your microphone, turn on your camera and say your name and organisation. And if you're calling via the phone, please say your name and location prior to speaking. let me hand over to anyone that may have any questions at this point. And yes, we could probably stop sharing the slide so we can now get a hold of or hopefully see more of the participants. Thank you. Any issues or questions anyone would like to raise? Oh, perhaps whilst people are thinking, just to some ideas and things that we'd be interested to hear from you in terms of the two aspects of our draft decision. First, what do you think of our draft decision on the prices proposed by Wannon Water? So you may want to look at that or comment on the overall bills or the proposed changes to the fixed and variable charges for prices, the tenants' proposals, the owners and non-residential customers. You may also want to comment on the proposed new customer contributions, which are also known as developer charges. So it'd be welcome any feedback anyone has in relation to those. And I do note that Andrew is back with us online. We were just going to go to the questions and answers issues, and I know, Luke, you've joined us with the screen and you've got your hand up. Just before I turn to you, Luke, can I just give Andrew an opportunity? Andrew, just to let you know that Stephen, in your absence, did finish off the slides. It's not like we just cut out everything. He did a good tag team match and he finished it off for you. But I did promise that if you're able to join us, I would turn back to you to give you an opportunity to say anything further that you'd like to add in closing or anywhere else, either now or if you'd like to wait until the end of the questions and answer session before we finally close up. I will again throw back to you to give you a final opportunity to speak, knowing that you've gone through that unfortunate situation of dropping out. But is there anything you'd like to add at this point, or would you rather wait to the end?
Thanks, Satish. Steve and I planned that if I did break out, he would jump in and finish it off, because when you're somewhere else, you never know if it's going to work, right? So, no, happy to just continue on and move on to the questions. That sounds great. Thanks, Satish.
All right. As I'll certainly come back to yourself and Stephen and Kelly before we close up shop to give you all on behalf of Wannon Water an opportunity to have any final says that you'd like to today. Luke, you had your hand up. Welcome.
Thank you, Satish. So, yeah, Luke Lovell from Consumer Action Law Centre, Senior Policy Officer there. Probably just to touch on the two areas that you mentioned, Satish, and we did raise them in the submission we made. Probably should just start by saying congratulations to the Wannon Water team on the customer engagement. I know in our submission we recognised that they had really deep long-term engagement with customers. But yeah, around I think particularly the new customer contribution, it would be good to see that addressed in the any update. Just noting that I think across, and this is not just Wannon Water, but any of the businesses, as a principle, I think we really want to see all users paying their fair share. So just ensuring that the new customer contribution is reflective of that, and developers are paying their fair share, and that is tested with your customer base. And then I think on the prices point, we did originally raise concern around the different rate of increase for renters versus homeowners. But I think in the draft decision that has been addressed. So I think happy with that.
Thank you. Is there any response that anyone from Andrew or anyone from Wannon Water would like to respond with at the moment, or as Lucas suggested, to have it addressed in your submissions in due course? So completely in your hands, Andrew.
Yeah, I'll just have probably a brief high-level response, and thanks, Luke, and thanks for your submission as well. And those issues that you raised were certainly also raised by our customers in terms of affordability more generally. And the issues that you raised really helped us also undertake our customer engagement processes. So we did treat them seriously. We've still got work to do on the new customer contributions, and the Commission have asked those questions, so we will respond to those queries. But I think more generally, protecting vulnerable customers, our communities is quite a central theme in our price submission. And what our research that we've done over the more recent time shows is the level of vulnerability in our community is greater than the number of customers that access our support services, because we do have a range of support services for customers experiencing financial difficulties. And so one of the initiatives, or one of the key initiatives in this price submission, is really being a lot more proactive in identifying and getting more customers into those support services that we do offer. The other feedback that we do have is once customers are actually in and getting that support, they find it really valuable and helpful. So it's more about getting people in there. So that's a bit of a high-level response, but thanks, Luke, and we'll make sure that we continue to, and that will also be a theme in our response back to the Commission on the draft decision.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks, Andrew. Appreciate that. Any other questions that anyone would like to raise? So I was suggesting options in relation to the pricing aspect, but can I also, on behalf of the Commission, make a suggestion in terms of any feedback, whether it be now or through other submissions before the 9th of May, on what you think of our draft decision on Wannon Water's performance and their future service commitments. So as part of the price submissions, as you know, each water business presented their performance and posed a set of outcomes that customers will receive during that 2023 to 2028 period. And if you'd like to find out more, rather than just dealing with it today, about these outcomes and how they'll affect customers, you can have a look at Chapter 3 of the draft decision. And again, as I say, from the Commission's perspective, we'd welcome any community feedback we can get in relation to those issues, as we do with all water businesses. And in saying that, can I also likewise take this opportunity, Luke, to acknowledge you and Calc for your valuable contributions from a consumer perspective or a community perspective on these various issues. This really is, as Andrew has also indicated, in terms of the balancing act that has to be performed, really out there to try and ensure that the business is viable and continues, but is balanced with serving the interests of the community in terms of price and service and so forth as well. So the more insights we can gain from all members of the community is really helpful in that perspective. So if that provokes any thinking, whether it be now or through your submissions, we do appreciate them if you would be willing to put pen to paper if it's not in terms of asking questions today. And of course, if there's anything else that hasn't been covered off today that you think we should be covering off, please feel free to provide that feedback as well, or raise that as an issue or comment or anything today if anyone wants to. So here's another final opportunity before I hand over to Andrew, Stephen and Kelly for any wrap up that they may want to provide if there are no other questions. But not trying to cut anyone short, want to make sure everybody feels like there is a genuine opportunity to provide feedback or ask questions or provide comments. Okay, thank you very much. If not today, then as I say, we would welcome any of those comments by way of submissions or further submissions. I can then, in that turn, go to the close and we'll put up the website details for Engage Victoria as well. So thank you all. Between now and the 9th of May, which is when submissions close, so again, encourage you and your teams to liaise with Marcus Dean and the Commission's water team. Obviously, as you heard, Wannon Water is certainly doing that as well. If anyone else has any other questions from the community perspective, please feel free to reach out to Marcus Dean and the water team. They're available to field any questions you may have. Can I, on behalf of my fellow commissioners and the Commission itself and the Commission staff, take this opportunity to extend my sincere thanks to everyone for making the time to join us today. I certainly know that the team is looking forward to continuing to hear your feedback. If there is nothing further, I then thank you once again, and I now close the meeting. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Satish. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.